Hi, what's up, everybody? Welcome to my first episode of Friends with Benefits. I just want to, before Nancy jumps on, she's my first person I'm interviewing, I want to kind of give a recap of what this series entails, what it's going to be like, in case you missed the promos before this. But essentially, what Friends with Benefits, what this series means. I know the title sounds a little scandalous, but it's nothing like that. It's just a hook. Really, it's about different friends that I have that I'll be interviewing that I am so grateful to have because anywhere I look in my friends' circles, because I have multiple circles, there's always people in my life that have so much to offer, so much valuable information, whether it's personal stories that they can share or people who are furthering their education in the medical field. In different fields too. I don't want you to think that we're just hitting, physical health. This whole series is going to be hitting mental health, physical health, spiritual and soul health, all sorts of health issues that we're going to be touching on. Like I mentioned a little bit ago, Nancy is my first guest that I'm interviewing. Hold on. I know she's in here. I just don't know how to add her, y'all. There's a plus button here. I'm going to assume this is what this is. I don't know if that worked. Oh, it worked. Hey, Nance.
Work.
Wow, that was not as hard as I thought. Anyway, I was just updating people on what this series is going to be about, how you are my first speaker. I really haven't touched base with, my page or anyone saying about what you're going to be talking about.
Okay.
I'll let you get into that. But before you start talking, I do want to say that this story is very special to me just because I feel like your story in general, I've had the honor of being front row, to see you like progress in life and just change from when I met you to who you are today. So it's going to be a good one.
Y'all gotta hit me at some point, Andrea.
Nancy, we both know your change was not just puberty. Like, get out of here.
Obviously, I can introduce myself for anybody that's on your page and doesn't know who I am.
Go ahead, boo.
But yeah, so I'm Nancy. I technically have known Andrea since we're in like elementary school, because we're charter starters. But we definitely got closer in high school because we were just in a lot of like the same activities and whatnot. But I think she wants me to kind of go into like wellness is what I like to call, because like she said, like, it's not just going to be about like physical health. To me, wellness encompasses like not only physical but mental health as well, and also just like emotional health, your spirituality, your faithfulness, like just being healthy in general. Like being a healthy person isn't just one thing.
Yeah.
um
100%. I'm gonna cut you off real quick, just because that reminded me that like that's another reason you're a perfect first guest speaker for this series, because I feel like your story encompasses all of those things. Like it's not a specific topic, it's just your your life change in the last 10 plus years encompasses all of those topics.
yeah, so I would say that, like, growing up, I wasn't into anything health related. Like I didn't play any sports. I think I was always intrigued by like the mind, and things of like that nature, but not to the point where I was like an tuned, like great communicator, like really in touch with my feelings kid or anything like that. Um, and then I would say like two things happened in high school that kind of started my shift in like preparing me for that. So one was that I did have a pretty close friend who was already studying psychology and also dealing with like their own mental health issues, and it just started like, even though he wouldn't like go in depth with me, like I just started to see a little bit about like, wow, there's an awareness of this, rather than like I kind of grew up where people just kind of wrote off of their personality traits, whether good or bad, as just like, this is how I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as like physical health, my dad and my grandpa passed away from cancer within the same year, and that was 10th grade. So 11th grade. 11th grade.
11th, yeah.
11th. Um, so but that really kind of opened my eyes to, and like cancer is really prevalent in my family, but seeing it firsthand really made me start to become hyper aware of like environmental factors versus just biological factors. Um, and so I, from there for sure, I think I started to just like be a little bit more aware as far as like, am I predestined for this? Like, is this my life, or is
Mm,
we can
yeah.
come from it, you know?
Yeah.
But then I would say like the rest of high school, I was just a little bit more in the depths of like the mental health, you know, like just navigating through it, like figuring out like what's going to work for me, what's not going to work for me. And then after high school, I would say is when I started just working out. Um, and when you start working out, at least what happened to me was that I got very into it where like I never was like an overweight kid, but I, like I said, I wasn't into any sports. So I definitely was like a little chunkier. The puberty, the little like chubby face weight, like was definitely still there. So as I would see physical changes in my body, and also I just like, I think I've always liked some form of like physical endurance and competition, but I was never really exposed to it. So I didn't know how to like tap into like to it, right? And then the more I would work out, and I think it happens to most people, like when they get that you begin to crave like healthier foods and like you just want to eat better. Because it doesn't really feel good to eat like a cheeseburger after a really good workout, you know, like it just
Right. I
it
mean, sometimes it does, but yeah, I get you.
you just feel, you know, your body starts to crave different things. So I would say that like I started just eating cleaner, right? I just started
Mhm.
healthier, not anything to do with like knowing what I was putting into my body. I just knew that like, all right, well, I'm starting to see more people that are like real athletes and stuff like that. And what they're fueling themselves, like, let me try this. Like, probably like from there, I started trying like, you know, probably like different protein powders or whatever. Like the very
Mhm.
right of just like learning like what is this, you know, what is nutrition, it's like health in general when it comes to like your food intake. And at the same time too, like because I was just getting into working out, like it was already creating a routine where I think as anybody also is, you know, whether it's a home workout or going to the gym or being part of a program, like when you have that routine, that consistency like does something to you within your mind where if you miss a day, like you do feel different, you know.
Yeah.
I've also always really enjoyed more smaller gyms, if that makes sense, where there's like more of a community feel, um,
Yeah.
versus like the big box gyms and things like that. And I'm kind of like figuring this out right now as we're talking that like I think a little more with just like again like that mental health aspect of community as well, where it's just like there's like a healthy dose of competition. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
on someone to improve, but like you're cheering them on. You know, like where if you're like yeah, if you were just working out at a big box gym by yourself, like you're not feeling it, you might walk off. Where when you're in those smaller, if you are kind of lagging behind, like the person next to you can be like, no, you could finish. You know, like there's just community that I think definitely help with mental health
I
as well.
like that you've said that a couple times because I think that's so true. And I don't know if people think about it as often, is that like when it comes to like saying generally like, oh, I feel like I want to be healthier, right? Because I feel like that crosses our minds a lot. It's so important to I personally, I could be, it might not be the same for everyone, but to first tackle the mental and emotional part of your health, and then everything else will kind of flow from there. It'll still be work, but I think it really does originate at making sure that your heart is healthy, like emotionally, and that your mind is healthy before you start tackling on like physical activities and start changing your habits and everything else that you like mentioned experiencing. I don't know if Danielle's still in here, but she wants to see the belly. We're talking about family and health, so bring
Oh,
out the boy.
oh yeah, I'm having a boy. I don't know. You said just ask. I mean, I could stand up, but I'm just like, okay,
Oh,
this is it, guys. um. Also, let me know because there's like seeds in my smoothie. So if I get seeds in my
I
tea,
literally thought the same thing. I was like, bro, I didn't even check my teeth. I just finished eating a sandwich, and I'm out here like,
uh, okay, so yeah, so then that probably I graduated high school 2011, 2012. I would say was like the bulk year of like really getting in tune with like just starting to work out and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of continued. At the time I was working at a restaurant, so I was just constantly, if you guys have ever worked in that industry, you know that it's a pretty much, it could be a very negative cycle, right?
Yeah.
For everyone, but it can be for a lot of people, because what ends up happening is that, you know, you make quick cash and then
Mm-hmm.
end up spending all night either drinking, partying, spending that cash, and then you don't have to wake up early the next day, and it's just like a consistent routine, right? So this is like the beginning of me in college. Thankfully, I really don't feel like I was too bad into the partying like that. Like I did, you know, still have money at the end of the day. It wasn't a waste, but I do know just from consistently staying in the food industry that that's what tends to happen to a lot of people, is that they really get lost in that sauce, like,
Yeah.
and it's a really hard cycle for them to get out. And I knew I just wanted more for my life, so I would say it was 2015, so I'm like approaching like the last year of college, and I had already at that restaurant job had met probably like my first vegan friend, which I don't know if Ashley's on here, if she watches this later, um, but I'd become vegan, which vegetarian I was to, because I think that like the first vegetarian friend that like I really remember would be like Victoria, because I remember in middle school
Oh, yes, yes.
like veggie nuggets and like that, seeing that, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, you know, like, so. And obviously as I think during our generation like vegetarianism was like growing a little bit more, but I had never
Yeah.
been vegan. And so she was just like a super huge introduction to that world, and like what it does and the reasons why and like all the benefits for it. And so before I left the restaurant that we were both working on, she had left to go work for Hugo Fresh, which if you're from South Florida you might have heard of. They don't exist anymore, but at the time they were like the first people to really start doing cold press juicing in South Florida. And the same thing too, I think, and I think you did it too. Like she was like, "Yeah, let's do a juice cleanse," you know, like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
where like, we didn't know what we were doing. We're like, "All right, yeah, let's do a juice cleanse."
Yeah.
We're already like those little steps of like the physical fitness had been like the planters, right? Like the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're like, all right, well, this is supposed to be healthier for us. And like we read the reasons why, and obviously she kind of broke it down a little bit better for us. I think the first one was like a store bought one that we did from like Whole Foods or something. Who knows? But
Yeah. Some blue label or something. I don't remember.
I think it was Blueprint. Um,
Blueprint. That's what it is.
but why? Because since she had already like kind of engulfed herself into the vegan world, she was already just familiar with like the cold press juicing benefits. Um,
Right.
that nature, and like what are the health benefits to it or whatnot. So that wasn't something that was big in Florida yet, but Hugo Fresh was like definitely the ones kind of like marketing that cornerstone. So she went to go work for them. Obviously, like we kept in touch with her. I did progressing and whatnot, and I would say yeah, like around 2015, I just realized that like I wanted to work with something that was a little bit more aligned with me. So instead of working at an Italian restaurant and like selling, you know, pasta and like bread and just things that aren't maybe necessarily bad, but just also aren't like aligned or like really helping people. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there, I wanted to just kind of like myself with it. So I went to go work for them. They were on at that time like on a rapid pace of growing. So I went in already as like a shift leader because of all my like experience beforehand in the food industry that was like still applicable. I was also about to graduate college, so like a few of those things kind of played factors into it. And they were growing stores, so they needed more like leaders in that world. So
Mm-hmm.
that was really like the biggest I would say it was like a really good blessing. I was there for 2 years. And it taught me a lot, obviously, about leadership. It also taught me a lot about company culture. My degree is in psychology, so it was like just really hand in hand because that was the first job I ever had, and it's still the only job I ever had where like, you know, before a meeting we would like meditate together, like to be all be
Love that.
know, like, and things that are I really reflecting upon them is like such a blessing that I had, especially like that early on, that it was just like whoa. At the same time too, of course, like all the products that we were selling were clean and they were as eco-friendly as possible, and you know there was meaning behind the goal. There was meaning behind like the profits. Like yes, we were making sales, and of course, you know, like there is a business side of it, but at the same time too, it was introducing and educating people on like what are the benefits of juicing, what are the benefits of like, you know, acai bowls and like things like
Yeah.
some people just sound like, or now they just think are like very trendy, but there are a lot of health benefits to a lot of the ingredients, you know. And they did a really good job with like not only including us as like employees as part of like the process, but really recruiting a lot of like knowledgeable people. Like there's
Yeah.
so many people from that job that I am still in contact with, and in different areas, like I consider and regard them as like experts for certain things, and like just very in tune like with wanting to reconnect with the earth and like the ingredients that like we already have here. So I would say during that period was definitely when I reconnected with like the idea that all the medicine that we need, like God already placed on this earth.
Yeah. For sure, when you started working there is when I started, like, I think getting the secondhand effects. Like, I started thinking about like food and like the benefits, because anything I had done prior to that, like a juice cleanse or, you know, whatever food diet I would like consider, I think was more, I was still so young minded and still more focused on like, will it give me abs? Like, is this gonna grow my butt? You know, like I still wasn't thinking about the nutrition and the fuel that food is until you started working there. And then that's why I brought you on, because that's like the whole point. I want to circle back to just saying that like everywhere you look, even you've mentioned in your story so many people that have influenced your journey. They just plant little seeds, introduce little things. Everything's about introduction. But so that was life changing for you. Hugo Fresh changed my life. I didn't even work there.
Well, because you still talk about that meal, so
Oh my god, I know.
um but yeah, so by the time that the last year that I worked for them, which was also like a world mind opening like experience, they had already transitioned to most of their stores being within Whole Foods. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the last role with them was overseeing two of the Whole Foods locations, and I have always worked in the food industry, but like the supermarkets are like a whole nother world. And I got a lot. Whole Foods is obviously a lot different from like a typical supermarket in a lot of aspects. You know, they do tend to have a lot more like natural ingredients, and they, from what I observed as like being in within their walls, but not necessarily employed with them, was that they did have a good company culture as well. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
aligned values between Hugo Fresh and Whole Foods, and I think that's why the partnership. Um, but I was also, like I said, just I had no idea like how, I don't even think I had thought about like how does the food get here. Like yes, we go to the supermarket and we get it, and like on the consumer end I was already like knowledgeable as far as like, you know, making better steps and better decisions towards like what your choices are when you're looking at your choices, but I had never really thought about like who decides that these are the choices, like how do these choices get in front of us, like, you know, things like
Yeah.
um, and so it was just like crazy, like seeing the backside, like not the aisles, but like when you go to like the other side and you're just like, whoa, like how this all happened, like the prepared food section, like just again too, like how they decide who what the vendors are. And at the same time too, I was getting more responsibility with Hugo Fresh. So I was seeing a lot more as far as like, hey, these are the that we order from, like these are the choices, like this is what that process looks like as far as
Mm-hmm.
ordering, receiving, and things like that. We won't even get into like obviously like the business benefits of being exposed to that, but just like really see, again, I was very lucky that constantly partnering with vendors that either had aligned values or just like ingredients that they were very proud to carry and things of that nature, where when you, again, when you work like in a restaurant and things like that, it tends to be a lot more about bottom dollar versus quality. of ingredients,
Yeah. Hmm.
making sure that this is like the best bet. So there is a reason a lot of times why green juices are more expensive and things. And you go to places like a raw juice or like a clean juice and plantation and things like that, that like it's a little pricier, or you think, but it's because they are taking those extra steps, you know. From there, I went to go work for Cisco, which, if anybody has never heard of them, you have. You just probably are not aware of what they, but they're the largest food distributor in the world, actually. Specifically, obviously, in the US. We're in South Florida, so if you've ever eaten at a Flanagan's, you have Cisco products, because that's a huge, if not one of their biggest clients down here for sure. And in my head, I thought it was like the dream job, right? So really, what I was in charge of doing was working with I would say like the pops, like it's the locally owned businesses in the food space. It didn't necessarily have to be a restaurant. It could be a bar. It could be a cafe. It could be a school. But for the most part, it does tend to be restaurants that are locally owned versus like the chain. So not necessarily a Chili's, but if you have, if you know some place that's down the street. Sorry, I'm blowing up now. And I thought it was a dream job because I'm like, great. Now that I had already gotten that exposure to like where we're sourcing our food, I can really go see like how the food gets here, because they are the ones that are like putting it on the truck, distributing you the food, and then as well as like they're the ones that make those relationships with like the farmers, with the big plants that there are in the US and outside the country, as far as like getting your food here. Like, there's times, like for example, like salmon, like where we'll read about salmon, or it's like coming from this place, but it's like, how did it get here? And so
Hmm.
play a huge role in that. So I thought it was like the dream job at first, and I was just like learning about food and all this stuff like that. And while there is so many amazing things that they do, there's also a lot of like exposure that I got to like the very negative side of the food industry, especially in America, and where profit and FDA regulations and non-regulations have just become like the utmost important thing versus quality of ingredients, nutrition.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how else to explain it, but just like fueling your body versus poisoning your body.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, like, I've always said that it's kind of easy for me to be mainly plant-based, but it would be a lot hard, like, it would be a lot easier, I should say, to be fully, like, vegan or something if I lived on a farm and I had to see, like, I think a lot of people could resonate that if you had to see the killing of the animal or, like, everything that goes behind it. I think it was great that you ended up working there because you got to see that. You know what I mean? Like you got to see the parts that make you like almost wake up and think like, oh wait, no, like that's not what I want.
Yeah, for sure. There's also a huge, so when I left Cisco, I was there for 3 years, was technically in the midst of the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
Kind of seemed like the right time for me, at least. There had already been a number of red flags, like I said, where it was just like I'd come to the conclusion that like my core values were just not aligned with that company. And again, there are amazing things that they do and amazing companies that they partner with, and I'm glad I got that exposure. But there was also a lot that like just did not sit well with my soul, and that's like the
Hmm.
I put it. The work life balance as I was getting older and like transitioning like a new chapter in my life was also just not there, and that again, I was coming from maybe a little bit more of a spoiled company where, like I said, where we were like treated very well as far as like employee standards, as far as just like, I would say like employee benefits in the sense that I care about, right? So like, I don't necessarily care too much about like, cool, I can get in at like a better stock price, and maybe that is something that someone watching is like, really clicks with. But to me, I care more about like, hey, you know, we do monthly yoga that is like you're available to take on, or like, you know, we have mental health resources that you're able
Yeah.
to access to and things like that. Like that is what I care more about.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it was just I never really drank coffee until that job. Like that's the best way I could put it. Where it was just like that was the culture. It's just like go go go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. You know, by their own admission, in meetings they would definitely say like, well, we all know that we're like married to the job, like we all know that like we don't really have a day off, like things that are just like
Oh yeah, and normalizing like the bad stuff, like overworking.
now, because at the end of the day it was still a corporate job. Like my role
Mm.
wasn't necessarily like in an office 9 to 5, but it was still all of the like negative aspects of like a corporate role that you could presume, like anything that you've
Yeah.
ever um so there was that, and then just a number of, again, more, I didn't really feel like I had mentors there, in the sense that like there wasn't anybody that like I clicked with that was like, wow, this is the goal, like I can't wait to be like in their position, because again,
Mm-hmm.
I could see that there was no work life balance, like there was no, like you gotta grind it out now in order to get to the point where you can have real days off, you know. So there
Yeah.
was the more knowledge that I was getting on like the vendors in the food industry, and like what we were helping to facilitate, the and I would raise questions, and like
Mm-hmm.
really like cared about these questions, that I was just like, this just doesn't seem like the right fit for me. So in a time period where people were like didn't know if they were still gonna have a job, I
Yeah.
definitely just felt like God was like, you know, sometimes we wait for, or we want for like, you know, the door, we want God to do it, like, you know what I mean, like we want him to open or close the door in our lives, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
the door is there, but like he's waiting for us to do it, like it's not gonna happen
Yeah.
unless we physically like open or close that door. That's the best way I can put it. So
And you closed the door. You said, "Peace out."
And then the funny thing is, because I know you wanted me to talk a little bit about like listening to your body and whatnot, is that it took me leaving that role to really realize the physical impact that that job had on my body. And it's something that I don't think that many people realize, or really, really many people ever think about, like, you know, what,
Definitely.
how their job impacts their physical body and like their overall health.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from obviously, you know, culture, because I know a lot of people in offices are like, oh, there's snacks all the time, or like, you know, vendors will come and bring us like donuts, or like they'll buy us lunch and XYZ and all that stuff like that that tend to contribute to not the healthiest decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also obviously like the time scheduling. So I know a lot of people will skip breakfast because they're like, I didn't have time, I had to run to work, or like I had to
Yeah.
work lunch. You know, just a bunch of different things that like, again, does play a role. But with that job, I had my stress level. We can get into, I guess, like a more female topic is like my menstrual cycle, which is
Hit
like
it.
the best way that I can. It's the real physical evidence that I have, as
Yeah. Yeah.
far as like this job was physically affecting my health. In the sense that I have always had a very regular cycle. Really nothing crazy, you know, just once a month, like couple days, like no crazy cramps, like thank you Lord, like I've
Yeah.
never been anything like out of the norm. And over I started tracking my period on an app, just because I had already gotten into, before I left Hugo, before I left Hugo Fresh, before I left Cisco, I had already stopped birth control, and not because of the goal of like, oh, I wanted to conceive a child already or anything like that, just because I never liked how birth control affected me, both mentally and physically. And obviously, the more I would research about it, the more I'm like, I don't want to put this into my body. I definitely understand that there is like certain physical and medical scenarios where birth control is
Mm-hmm.
set, but for me, it just wasn't. It was just like an alternative to birth control that like there are other methods, you know?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was doing to as my form of birth control was actually tracking my period. And so from there, after I had left Cisco, I was like looking one day and I realized because I had gone from I would get it consistently once a month, like, you know, pretty routinely always to like the point where it kept getting a little further and further away, right? So like I would get it, maybe not necessarily that I would skip a month, but I would get it, let's say like the last week of June, wouldn't get it in July, but then the first week of August. So like the cycle was already getting longer, longer, longer
Yeah.
to the point where when I the last cycle that I had while I was still employed there, it it was like over it was like 60 days.
Oh my
And
God.
like usually my normal was like 33 days. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like it was really routinely. So obviously the first thing that people think when you're going through that is like, okay, am I pregnant? No, I took a test, nothing. Um Again, I got my period. It's just that the cycle kept stretching out, stretching out, stretching out. And then literally the month I quit in May, the month after that, my cycle dropped from like, I think, like I said, the highest it got to was like 58 or 60 days. And then it went down to like 45. And then the next cycle after that, it went down to like 38 or like 35. Like it just kept going back down to normal as I got out of it. And it's just, to me, that was just like, whoa. Like, and I didn't have that revelation until after I left. Like, had I known that, I probably would have quit sooner, because I really wasn't even like listening to my body's signals there while I was there. Like the stress and like the focus of just like, no, these are the goals and like this is the work that needs to get done. Like this is the priority
Yeah.
overtaken like really listening to your body. Thankfully, I was still tracking everything, but it took, and it's just crazy between like just 1 month to the next of like quitting that like it just plummeted right back down. Like as soon as that was the only thing that changed. As soon as that factor was out of my life, like my cycle just went right back to being very regular and normal.
It's crazy. I think we separate too often, like the workplace and health. Like we just leave. I know I barely made appointments to see doctors when I was working a 9 to 5 because there's just no time. And like, you don't want to waste PTO. And like, that's the more simple mindset. But the other one is like what you're saying is like, we don't even think about how we're feeling physically at work or like what effects there are. And that's the scary part is that sometimes you don't take action or make a change until you see like a drastic, until you feel something differently, until you've like really noticed. And if you're not paying attention, like you're not going to notice. So I'm glad you noticed. I know we talked about your other workplaces. I kind of want you to tell everybody what you're doing with Cultivated Belly, what it started as, what it is now.
Okay, so yeah, so I started July last year. I like to call it a lifestyle brand. It's called Cultivated Belly. And really what it focuses on is the relationship that we with food. And really the core of it that I can explain to people is knowing what we're putting into our bodies. So what some of the stuff that we've done so far is like put on different workshops where it's a hands-on experience where people can come and learn a new cooking skill that they can take back home. But and that's like, the fun part, and obviously like, you get a little dirty and like you get to eat it and that's amazing. The real knowledge and the real takeaway for me is that I will go a little bit more in depth into like how to source those grocery ingredients and
Mm-hmm.
how to like not only navigate the supermarket but reading the labels in a healthy way and in a sustainable way. That's something that like the brand really prides itself on, is teaching people how to sustainably be healthier. I don't like to bash a lot of diets because I do know that again everyone's body is very different and they work for a lot of people in different capacities. um, but I don't think that it's good to. I don't really like the word diet. Is the best way.
Yeah.
And don't think that it's very sustainable for a lot of people to just get themselves on a diet for a number of reasons. The first one being is that it's usually vain motives. It's usually because you want to lose weight, or you want, like you said, do I have abs? Do I have this, that? Versus really learning how to like have a healthy relationship with food. And then two, it's also not sustainable in the sense like, you know, you hear a lot of people that they dropped a lot of weight like really fast, but then the second that they get off that diet, they gain it right back. And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
not sustainable, because if you're, unless that's a lifestyle, a food lifestyle that you want to commit to eating for the rest of your life, like it doesn't make sense. Like you need to be able to listen to the cues that your body gives you, um, and just make decisions aligned with it, so then that way you can just lead like a healthier, more sustainable lifestyle. And I definitely I'm getting a little off topic with Cultivated Belly, but this is really what it does, and like what the mission behind it is to just teach people how to have like sustainable relationships with food. The goals for Cultivated Belly is to, again, just really share like the story behind food. There's a lot of people in the food industry that have beautiful stories, and like to me, food is the universal language. Like it's like the one that not only brings people together, but like you can be sitting at a table with somebody from a different culture that doesn't speak your language, and like still share a memorable experience and still like understand each other.
Yeah.
um, like the easiest way I can like really break that down to as well is like if you look across the globe, there's a lot of foods that multiple cultures consume, and they're nowhere near each other, and they're nowhere like it's but every country has like their own version, right, like of bread, um
Mm-hmm.
and just different methods of doing it. It's like it is like universal language. So the goal is to continue like sharing stories of people through their food as well with Cultivated Belly.
I
um
used to think that if someone had like a passion for food, like I honestly used to think that that was so unhealthy. Like, and you know, there's so much like there's foodies out here, and there's people who like have the passion for food, and I don't know why I used to think that was an unhealthy relationship with food. Like clearly that was something that I was projecting on people, but I think you were one of the first people to make me realize that like you can have a super healthy passion for food and want to spread that message and mission. Like this is just a small example, but I love, because I think you guys are the first one to teach me, when I go out and eat with your family. The fact that we literally all go out, the goal I feel like is kind of understood to like try whatever we can, because it's about exploring new foods, how you can cook them, obviously talking about them, what we like, what we didn't like. We'll literally go out there, and between you and Carla, and then sometimes Roger, we'll just order like half of the
He's
menu, and we're literally
more,
what?
more Jason than Roger.
Yeah, I guess Roger just takes over in dessert
But he
time. Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Jason, Carla, and you pick everything, and we kind of just pass the plates around, and I love that. I love that, and I feel like I only want to eat that way when I eat out now. Um, so I'm really glad that through your whole journey, food kind of stayed your passion, but the motive kind of like everything changed to like just cleaner, food, cleaner living, cleaner mentality. Like everything you went through obviously helped you, but it helped me without, you meaning to. It touched my life, and I'm sure it still touches other people's lives. So I'm really proud of what you're doing, Nan.
I mean, I think when it comes to, just to like touch upon the whole cleanliness of food too, I don't want people to think, like I said, like the whole reason that you can be have a sustainable lifestyle is because, don't think that like, yeah, there are some days that like maybe I'm a little bit more plant-based, or maybe I'm a little bit, more vegetarian or more vegetarian or whatnot, but like it's not that I don't consume animal products, it's that I'm very mindful of where those animal products,
Yeah, exactly.
because there is a healthy relationship. Again, like it's, and I've realized this with like trying to explain what my brand does with an older generation, is that you kind of encounter two different things, right? So you might get people like, oh, I've been eating this way for forever. Like, there's nothing wrong with the food. Like, this is what we've been doing. And
Hmm.
most of us in our generation, especially in South Florida, like, our parents didn't grow up in this country. Our parents grew up in a different country where there was a lot more, like you said, like they lived on the farm, or like they knew the farmer, or they
Yeah.
were bartering for like the milk with the eggs and things like that. Like most of us do have parents still, and if not, maybe if you're a little bit a little disconnected, then maybe you used to have grandparents to tell you about this. But even in America, oh, it's really over like since like the 90s, I would say that like a lot in the food industry has changed. So when you're trying to speak to, trying to get your parents to get a little bit more in tune with what they're putting in, which we all definitely struggle with, is that
Yeah.
they have a hard time realizing that the food here is different. They have a
Yeah.
hard time, like making that distinction between the two. And then at the other side too, then you are gonna get like those people who are just like they have the impression that it's expensive to eat healthy.
Hmm.
It's another thing that I like really try to teach people, because it well, for starters, like you can decide whether you want to invest more in your health now, whether it comes to physical, like your nutrition, whether it comes to your mental health. Like you can either be proactive about it, or wait until something unfortunately maybe happens down the road, and then you're gonna be on the defense, which
Yes.
will definitely end up being a lot more expensive in the long run
Yeah.
on the proactive end of it. I didn't realize the like comments were not flowing, so they just like all shot up right now.
Um,
Um, but yeah,
yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I never thought of it that way. I feel like I guess you guys have that saying in your family because I had heard Roger say that to me before, and he's kind of
what,
just like we'll say that sometimes. Where like, well, would you rather pay the money now or later in a hospital? Like now in the grocery store, later in a hospital, kind of thing. And like you can really apply it to anything. Like now in a gym or later in a hospital. Like now in whatever. But
yeah, for sure. And I think that again, it's not that we grew up this way by any means. And I think that there is a lot of like, again, our generation is very into like, let's break generational curses, let's do like all the healing that needs to be done to like undo the trauma and things like that. And I think that it really teaches us a lot, because it's not one, yes, we are very lucky. I don't know what the shift has been, if it's been like just it's more accepted now, or where this sort of came from. And I know that's not all across the board, obviously. Like some of us may have been like siblings that are just not into it, or just still like living with just whatever parents have passed on or grandparents have passed
mhm,
on. But um it's just a day by day thing where we can either choose to like like we if you look just at my family, right? So, and I don't mean like my immediate extended family, for the most part there's a lot of health issues. Like I said, cancer runs really prevalent in my family, on one side. On the other side, there's definitely a lot of obesity, and health complications that stem from that. And I think it's very easy for us to just sort of say like, this is how we are, like, oh,
mhm,
this is my body type, or this is how we always eat. And there's a really beautiful way to like celebrate your culture and like the foods that you eat. Like I'm not saying that we don't, I still eat rice and beans, like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um all the foods that like I identify with my culture, but I also really try to connect to like the root of it, right? So when it comes to like, let's go with like the holiday season, right? There's a lot of things and like ingredients that we use, and we reconnect back to like nature, like to like Mother Earth, where like a lot of like the pasteles, where it's like a lot of like ground plantain and like things that like,
Mhm,
and like they're cooked in plantain leaves and things like that that are ancestral to me. Like when I really start to learn about the story behind it, it's like, okay, well, this isn't just like now, like, there's a reason behind it. There's a reason why a lot of these foods have been staples, and like they're because they have real nutritional value.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like
Yeah.
there's a way to, you have to look at it in a certain way, and that's when you start to respect what it does for you.
Yes. And I'm glad you said, I mean, earlier, and you're kind of still saying it about like, it's not like you're saying no to certain foods. It's not like you're saying like, okay, you have to be vegan, you have to be vegetarian. It's not saying no to certain foods. It's knowing more about the foods, where they're coming from, what happens when you cook them a certain way. It's more about the educational side, which is kind of what it's what you're doing with Cultivated Belly. So I'm glad you did that, girl, because we need that information. Just to wrap it up, because I know we could talk for years and years. Um, I, if you could, would like for you to close with advice that you'd give anyone who wants to make changes to live a healthier lifestyle, just in general, whether it's, you know, food, like we've been talking about, whether it's mentally or physically. What's your advice for someone who thinks that it's too overwhelming or it's too difficult to do?
Okay. So I definitely say that before you even get overwhelmed, is to like take a second to really acknowledge that desire within you. Because that really is step one. Like, even just wanting a change
Yeah.
in your life is step one. Like, you're recognizing that there is something that can be improved upon, that can change, that can better your life, and like that doesn't happen to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So like really acknowledge and like honor that within yourself, that like you want better for yourself in any of those areas. And then two, I really think that one, there's two different things which I think are the same thing but just in different methods, is like quieting your mind. And we really kind of touched upon that with like the whole wellness journal challenge that we did, like just sort of like either meditating upon it or just writing it out and like taking that time to like zone out on everything else. Is like you don't have to overwhelm yourself into like research or like spending upon a lot of money or like just going to the extremes already. Like, just really allowing yourself to get down to basics and like listening to your body, meditate, and like listen to what your body is telling you in any of those areas that we've already discussed upon, as far as like what makes me feel good and what doesn't make me feel good, and like really start from there.
That's good. That's good, Nance. Um, Man, that was great. We really could talk forever. I feel like I have more questions, but I do want to wrap it up because my phone's soon to die. But we could always do a part two one day. So if anybody has any questions that they have after seeing this, go ahead and leave it in the comments, or you can message either of us. Also, make sure to give Cultivated Belly a follow. Can't wait to see what you're going to do with it, Nan. I know you're going to have more educational tips. I don't know about the workshops, but whatever you're doing, we're here for it. So that's it. Again, leave us your questions if you have any. Hope everybody enjoyed this interview. I have another one coming with a different guest next week.
Tell us when. Tell us when.
It's Thursday. I just don't know what time, but it's next Thursday. So I'll see you guys then.
Yay.
Thanks, Nan.
Awesome. Hopefully, like everybody else.
Yeah. We'll do a round two. We'll do a session two one day.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.